Hello, welcome to Rough Cut Film Review. This is a very late review of the latest Resident Evil film, which is, I believe, called Retribution. Resident Evil Retribution. Resident Evil is, of course, the film franchise that looks and has all the substance of a Madonna pop video, and that's not a compliment to either of those two things. So it's going to be a relatively quick review because, quite frankly, I don't really want to pay this any more time or attention than it deserves. Okay, so what's my relationship with Resident Evil? Well, I did like the initial games, so I really liked Resident Evil 1, 2 and 3, and they were on the PlayStation. My favourite was Code Veronica, which is on the Dreamcast. The second one and Code Veronica are some of my favourite games of all time. I really, really like them. Sadly, the franchise has gone from being what was called survival horror, as it's now known, to action orientated, so it's big, loud and not scary, which is a move that is a mistake for me. So I did actually watch the first couple of Resident Evil films, and then I basically gave up on them. You know, I didn't see anything there of interest. They were big, they were loud, and not dark and scary, which is the route I wanted them to take. These films are based around a character played by Mila Jovovich. The character is called Alice, and she is unstoppable and not interesting. So I'll get on with the film I'm actually reviewing here, Retribution. So it's directed by Paul Anderson, who's had a long relationship with Resident Evil. So when he started his career, he actually made a couple of rather silly films, which I rather liked. So he made Event Horizon, which I really enjoyed. A lot of fun, very violent. He then went on to make Soldier with Kurt Russell, which was sort of a cheesy, fun action film that got completely panned by critics and came out at completely the wrong time. You know, things were changing. But I really enjoyed it. I think it's a bit of fun. There's stuff in there to mock, obviously, but overall it's good stuff. Since then, Anderson went on, he sort of made a niche for himself, really, right next to Uwe Boll, which is not good. He made the Mortal Kombat film, so more games there. He then made the really terrible Alien vs Predator, didn't get that at all. And then most recently, he's been working big time on the Resident Evil franchise, I suppose you'd call it. You know, it's one of those things that is a franchise. And it's been successful without ever producing any film of any kind of quality or substance. So, the film starts off. So in the opening scene, we get these sort of helicopters that don't exist in real life, as far as I'm aware, attacking this big boat, but for reasons that can only be known to Anderson, presumably. The whole thing is going in slow-mo backwards. So we're trying to work out what's going on. There's this loud music going on. Everything is very stylish and quick cut, and it just gives you a headache. And it really does a good job of setting the tone of what we're about to experience, just a thumping headache. Once that has gone on for a bit, we then get some sort of catch-up exposition, taking us back a few films, which makes very little sense. Obviously, the director thinks all this looks really cool, and he's completely wrong. It looks rubbish, and it's confusing, and it's just disorientating in all the worst possible ways. So it then skips back to, we start the film again, so we get the backward stuff, the exposition, then we get the forward stuff, and it makes no sense. There's sort of people in white coats running around. Are they getting shot? I think they're getting shot. They're getting caught by nets on a boat. People are shooting at each other, that's for sure, but it's just bafflingly confusing. And I've seen a couple of these films, and I was thinking, who? I didn't get it. But anyway, it suitably lowers your expectations for what is to come, and boy did they need lowering. So what's to be said about the film? Well, direction, as I've alluded to there, is terrible. So is the cinematography. The plot is a complete mess. It manages to be both simple and completely incomprehensible. The CGI monsters, of which are everywhere, look rubbish, and all of the characters there are from a pop video. They're completely two-dimensional, and every now and again we're supposed to care about one of them, when quite frankly I could not care less about characters in a film. It's amazing that these are supposed to be characters in a film. So what else? So the main character is basically Alice. She doesn't do, Mila Jovovich doesn't do a terrible job. She's quite good at this kind of thing, but her character is basically invincible. There's no sense of, they throw in this bit at the beginning with her family, the tragedy. She is in no which way a believable woman or person or anything. There's nothing to engage there. She's basically invincible. So what they do is they throw in this daughter person. So she's got to protect the daughter, but she doesn't really. I mean, she sort of sees her, and the daughter says, "I love you," and then she goes, "Yeah, I suppose so." And then she runs off and fights monsters, and then she sort of comes back, and the daughter says, "Oh, I love you," and you know, it's not really classy parenting. It's all a little bit convenient. She acts like she's never met this daughter character before, or in her entire life, and she's got very little interest in her. And they do these terrible scenes, literally, where the kid says, "I love you." And for some reason, the child is doing sign language, and Alice does sign language back to the child. But the thing is, as the child is doing the sign language, she's also speaking perfectly understandable English at the same time. So I don't really understand what that is. Is that she can't hear? But anyway, it's just very bizarre. I don't know. But, you know, I don't think the people that make this film have thought about that any more than that. So loads of problems. All the characters, all the actors clearly got hired, actors and actresses. They got hired because they are attractive physically, and it would have been like putting together a girl band or a boy band. You know, they've gone for the look. You know, so there's a guy that'll have a certain look. His buddy will have a certain other look. You know, they're sort of like the cute one, the dangerous one, the cool one. You know, this sort of thing. It's at that level of sophistication. Also, there's a lot of people bear in mind there's sort of been the zombie apocalypse or something. Although we don't really get a sense of the scale. We get told, they've taken over the world, but we don't really get any sense of that. But anyway, lots of people with sleeveless shirts, you know, to show off their muscles and cool tattoos and that kind of thing. And you think, well, to be honest, I don't really want to get bitten in the arm by a zombie. But, you know, there we are, you know, each to their own. So as I've said, the characters are just cardboard cutouts. Do you know what they remind me of, actually, is, you know, those really silly adverts we got over Christmas, and you tend to get them anyway. They're either for aftershave or perfume, where, you know, it's in black and white, and then it'll say something like, "Only the brave," and something just incredibly baffling, and it just sort of slightly angers me at how little sense that makes, and they're expecting you to buy the product off the back of it. Well, it's pretty much that level here. So, as I've said, the plot is paper thin. Also, it makes no sense. As far as I can understand, there's a mad computer from the first film, which I vaguely remember, and then someone who's doing a pantomime villain, but not cheesy and it's sort of cheesy and silly, but it's not fun. It's not funny. It's just confusing. At various points in the film, as I said, really, there's attempts to pull on your heartstrings, you know, so there's some tragedy in there, and I could not care less about these characters. Even calling them a character is being overly generous to this film. I mean, it was really, really confusing why they think that you care, honestly, and there's all this bad music coming in at you. It's unbelievable. So, you know, I suppose it's supposed to be an action set piece film, and it certainly is that, just not a very good one. For example, there's one point, you know, the goodies had this fight with these massive creatures, which looked exactly like something out of Silent Hill, which is a rival franchise, which is, again, running into trouble because they don't understand what was attractive about them. But anyway, had this fight, spoiler alert, the good guys win the fight. They then jump in a Rolls Royce, which just so happens to be there. And then, of course, out of nowhere, these bad guys on motorbikes, black riders with machine guns turn up to chase them, and then, you know, the music gets turned back up again, and it's just that kind of thing. But it's not a guilty pleasure. It's completely soulless. There's no fun to be had here. I can't stress this enough. It might sound from my review like this is irritating, you know, silliness, but actually it's kind of fun if you have a beer. This is not fun. This is worse than Total Recall, and if Total Recall want to quote me on that on their Blu-ray box, you know, better than Resident Evil, I'm more than happy to let them. This film was terrible, absolutely without merit. Kind regards, Christopher Thomas.